Since ancient times, women have been the epicenter of their villages and communities around the world, and as such, have been gathering in council to discuss topics relevant to them. Here, we are masterminding and exploring these topics in a modern way with entrepreneurs, speakers, coaches, and just overall good eggs, pun intended. This is The Council. So Surya Sol, who I'll introduce here shortly, and I dive into the topic of sacred sexuality. It feels very taboo. It feels very kind of out there. What is it? What does that mean? How do I get a hold of it? How do I experience it? So you will learn all about that today, but without further ado, I will introduce Surya. So Surya Sol is also known as the celebrity alchemist. She is an energy empress, best known for unleashing women globally into their goddesshood. Through quantum healing, she supports them in unlocking their true soul wealth. She is a no-nonsense spiritual guide that believes that every woman, no matter her beliefs, culture, and preferences, should experience the fullness of what her soul desires. She understands that the truth is fluid depending on the individual wants of each woman. Very juicy, right? So knowing this, she uses her psychic abilities, yes, you heard me right, to divinely guide them to manifest the forbidden versions of themselves beyond societal, religious, and educational rules. She is the founder of Taboo Tarot, where she uses divination to discuss everything from soul ties to polyamory, so that a woman has a safe place to own all of who she is and what she wants, both sexually and spiritually. It is her soul's mission to unleash women into freedom of identity on a soul level so that they can heal the world with their unique medicine. She can be found on all things social media at Surya Sol. That's at SURYASOL. Enjoy. Okay, well, I'm really happy and excited to have you on today. As mentioned in the intro, we have Surya Sol on to talk about sacred sexuality. This is, as you just mentioned before we got started recording here, this is a loaded topic and an expansive topic. So it's very exciting to dive into it.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to chat about this. It's a topic I feel like more of the world should be speaking about, but not everybody has the courage to. And so I'm really excited to dive in.
Yes, I am too. And I really hope that if my parents are listening, that they stop listening right now and they go listen to a different episode. I'm getting there, but I'm not quite there. I don't think I want to share that yet.
I get it. I 100% get it. Trust me.
So for those listening, I think it would be great if we just kind of start out with, I mean, this may seem really basic, but like what sexuality is and really actually defining that a little bit more clearly for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So sexuality for me is just an identifier of what brings you pleasure as it pertains to sex. And so what I love is to identify the difference between sexuality and sensuality, because I see people use them interchangeably and they're not the same thing, right? So sexuality is more of an identifier. Sensuality is what I would say like the senses that lead up to you feeling what you would feel as a sexual being. So sensuality is more so like your breathing. What are you seeing that brings you pleasure? What are you hearing? Smells, the things that deal with your senses, while sexuality is the actual act of what brings you the most pleasure and how you identify the things that bring you the most pleasure.
I love that. Okay, that is a good distinguishment because I think that, yeah, there would be a lot of just overlap. And I don't even think that sensuality is probably a word that a lot of people dabble in more than just, oh, that person is sensual or they're not. And like, that's it. When in reality, it's like a really powerful aspect, relation or cousin to sexuality.
It literally is the bridge into sexuality. And so I love to just bring that identifier in where it's like sensuality is absolutely like the foundational piece of sexuality. But sexuality is how do I identify as it pertains to sex.
Okay,
yeah.
I love it. Thank you for defining that. So taking it one step further, what is sacred sexuality?
So I'm always going to give my personal definition based on my experience. And for me, sacred sexuality is understanding yourself first, having intimacy first on a level with yourself, right? Because most of us do not. And therefore, our sexuality becomes wrapped up in whatever our partner desires or whatever the person who we are dealing with desires. So it is intimacy with self first. And then just being able to have boundaries and a healthy, I want to say, respect and honor for yourself and your body and for others, for other people and their body. That is for me what sacred sexuality is. And I also, like, not to make it too loaded, I just believe it is understanding that the coming together of two things is always going to either create or it's going to destroy. And so being mindful of what two things you bring together and what those two things are going to do. Is it going to create or is it going to destroy? And making sure that you honor your creative powers as a woman, because that is what we have as females, just because of how we are created.
Mm. Wow. Okay. Already we're like in it. And I'm excited because I think I have 3 questions. Okay. So, so the first one I think is about the intimacy. So especially
Yeah.
like self-intimacy. So my mind immediately goes to like the most obvious one, which is like masturbation.
Right.
So, but what other ways are there? And we can definitely talk about masturbation, but like what other ways of self-intimacy are there?
Oh, absolutely. So masturbation, I feel like, is the one that is heightened and, villainified and all of those things. And there's so many other ways for you to, like, just be intimate with self. One of the ways that I teach my clients and the people that come into my space is mirror work. And that is just being naked in front of the mirror, knowing what your body looks like, being able to identify your different body parts, just loving on yourself and your body. Intimacy for me is also, getting oils, right? Placing that on your body, massaging the different areas of your body, speaking to your body, listening for a response. Those things are intimacy, the same way that we have a relationship with a person, and you can't have a relationship with them, knowing what they like and what they dislike. You can't just, well, you can, but let's talk about like actual solid divine relationships. You have to communicate with that person. You have to know them. You have to know them beyond what you see as just the physical sense of who they are. You have to be able to dive deeper into who they are as a spiritual being, right? And connect with them on that level, on a soul level. And it is up to us to also do that and become intimate with ourselves beyond just what our physical body looks like, but who we are as a soul and a spirit, just in life, And so mirror work is a big way to do it. As I said, the oils and just adorning your body, massaging your breasts is a big thing that a lot of women do not do. That is actually very necessary in terms of intimacy. And just again, like, taking care of yourself is also intimacy, making sure that you go to the doctor regularly, getting a checkup, right? Making sure that you practice safe sex. All of these things are intimacy, and making sure that you are understanding who you are, understanding your body, and making sure that you take care of the temple that God, spirit, source, whatever floats your banana boat, has given you, right? We have so many words these days. I'm just like,
Yes,
you
I know.
can't be politically correct at this
Yeah.
point. So
all,
whatever.
all the things.
Yeah.
I love that mirror work. I've done it myself in some other ways, but I do love what you're saying because it makes such a good point. And I was actually just listening to I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Red Table Talk with like
Yes.
Jada. Okay, so for those listening, the Red Table Talk is hosted by Jada Pinkett Smith and her daughter Willow and her mother, who they just call Gam, but I don't know what her actual name is. But it's Jada's mom.
I can't even remember her name either.
I don't know, but they always call, they don't call her by her name though. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, there was an episode on where Jada, right after she had shaved her head and gone bald, and Tiffany Haddish popped on because she also had shaved her head, and she was talking about her reason was during quarantine, like she spent a lot of time obviously alone. She spent a lot of time diving into her spirituality and her religion. And, you know, a lot of it, she said, was about knowing thyself. Like everything was like, know thyself, know thyself. So she said she started looking at her body and being like, oh, this scar came from this, and this little bruise is from this, and all of
Yeah.
these little things. And she said, well, I don't know what's under my head. So she shaved her head and was like, now I can inspect, you know, what's on my head. And so it's kind of an extreme version of that in some ways, but I do think it is really beautiful, this understanding of like knowing thyself. And I think a lot of us who have been in long-term partnerships before, that we know our partners, you know, that little, you know, I don't know, that scar or that, you know,
Yeah.
that birthmark or those little things. And it's like, do we actually know that about ourselves? And
Most of
um,
us don't.
yeah, but that is such an intimate thing with a partner when you can realize like, oh, I know every little, you know, I don't want to say crevice, but what the word is.
Yeah. I know everything. I know where you have that beauty mark and that dimple. And
Yes,
yeah, we know everything
exactly.
about the other person, but know so much less about ourselves, or the things that we do know, we give allowances for our partner for having the scars or for not being in perfect shape or whatever the case may be. And then we in turn beat ourselves up for what we feel are imperfections. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that we, especially as women, need to do, is, you know, level that playing field where it's like, I am intimate and in love with myself, and therefore I can now expand that and give that to somebody else. Not that I'm giving it to somebody else but not giving it to myself. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're so right. There is a level of grace that we give our partners in
Yeah,
the allowance to be physically imperfect at times versus ourselves. And
absolutely.
that's huge. And kind of an offshoot of that um, is really like, you know, in terms of focusing on the other person,
Mhm.
is when it comes to pleasure, like in
Yes.
sexuality. And something you mentioned before was like, kind of like seeing it's seeing both you and your partner as like these, you know, these spiritual beings, these
Yes.
divine beings, like having that level of respect. So I'd be curious, like, how do you feel like it kind of plays on both sides? Because I can see
Yes.
situations where, you know, a person may see their partner as like, you know, let me pleasure and do everything for them, let me know their body instead of knowing my own. And on
Right.
the other hand, where we don't really, you know, some people, some partners may be very much like, maybe you're single and it's just, you don't really see that other person and respect them in that way. So I'd be curious, like, what thoughts you have around those two scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, where it boils down to, I don't like to just look at the surface thing. I like to go all the way to the beginning so we know how to, you know, rectify this situation, so we know how to eradicate it. And one of the biggest problems that I am finding in society, in the world, is that we prepare our sons for sex. We do not prepare our daughters.
Mm,
And that is a huge issue, right? Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, it legit is. It's one of the biggest problems that I see. And so when I have women that come into my space, for the most part, all of them have the same energetic center off, which is their sacral, which is connected to sexuality, right? They'll either have a block there, they'll have trauma there, or that center is just completely shut down. And so, how we fix that problem is by opening up the communication channels, healing our, you know, parent wounds. Our moms have to start healing so that we can actually start to have open dialogue about what it looks like for women to be sexual beings, because we are. And what is happening is that we have a society that plays on the fact that we are sexual beings, know that our power lies there, and therefore they shun it. And so we shun it because we take on the beliefs and the views of society. And then we get into relationships where now the men, if you are in a heterosexual relationship, the men can wear the pants, the men can call the shots, because we do not know ourselves as who we are. Just like how you said, know thyself, we do not know ourselves, right? And so I even take it a step further, where we're most of the times called into a religion, or we are born into a religion where we have to be intimate with a God, but yet we cannot be intimate with ourselves. It just doesn't make sense. We have to be able to do the things in this physical realm before we try to transcend into spiritual, you know, the spiritual segments. We have to master it here. And so I do believe that we as women owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our daughters, we owe it to our mothers to start our own personal healing journeys and to start talking about sexuality, to teach our daughters about self-pleasure so that another person doesn't have to come in and teach them what they want them to know. They'll be able to know their bodies. They'll be able to know what they like, what they dislike. They'll be able to have boundaries and say, hey, no, I'm okay. Like, I got this. I don't want to do this. Or yes, I do want to do this. But for the most part, we as women feel forced in some type of way to do certain things, to be a certain thing, because we're searching for something that we were not taught to give to ourselves. And that's where it becomes a problem. And so you'll find exactly what you said in the question, where it's women seek to pleasure their partners, or they seek to make sure that their partner is good, but they have a huge block around receiving pleasure. They have a huge problem with relaxing into pleasure because it feels bad or wrong. And so you'll even have women that they only have sexual intercourse if the lights are off. They only do certain things if they feel like the act is hidden, or no one knows, or they're not being watched, or you understand what they're not being judged, because they have this level of shame around something that is actually supernatural to us as women. Like, we are creators, that is our creative center. And so if we do not get to the place where we are healing that center, where we're activating it, we lose our radiance, we lose our light, we lose our magnetism, we lose the idea of the fact that we are creators and healers, right? We are the forces that bring souls through our portal. Like, how powerful is that? And yet we are making it seem as if the portal that brings forth the world, children of the world, that keeps repopulation and regeneration going, we act as if that thing is bad or wrong, or it's a sin to enjoy the act of sex, or to have pleasure during sexuality. And for me, that just, it's a no-no. We have to start educating ourselves. We have to start educating our daughters, even as it pertains to menstrual cycles. I can't tell you how many clients I have that come and they'll tell me stories about how they got their cycle and they had no idea what it was. They didn't know what to do. A nurse had to tell them, about their body. No one should be telling you about your body. That should be passed in your family. Someone should have a conversation with you. And even if they cannot have the conversation with you, they need to find somebody that can have the conversation or educate themselves so that they can prepare our women, because we're basically sending our women out into the battlefields of the world unprepared. And that's a problem for me. It's something that I am so adamant about dealing with, and making sure that my daughter doesn't have to deal with certain things, or feeling like she has to do something because she doesn't have education and awareness and knowledge of her body and how it works. And that just doesn't sit well with me.
Mm. Wow, there was so much gold in that, and so much I agree with. I'm sitting here, everything you say, I'm like, yes, that and that and that, because it really is true. Because you're taking it through the lens of society and how we're in this constant, damned if you do, damned if you don't, in terms of like being a woman in relation to our sexuality. It's like like you said at the beginning, it's like our sexuality is kind of weaponized against us. Yes. In a way, like it's, used for, sex cells, but, God forbid that you harness that yourself. Or
making money off of it except us. And if we do choose to make money off of it, we're evil,
right. Exactly.
It makes sense.
Exactly. And it really is wild. And what you said too about, boys are being trained for this, they're being prepared for it. And girls are not. And that's very true. I mean, there's, I think the safest way for like a girl to get to know her body, a woman to get to know her body, is starting with the self and having that safe container versus like, oop, here you are alone now with this, partner, and who knows what would happen. So I do love a lot of what you were saying. I'm also curious, within that, like, Well, two things. One, I also, the portion that you're saying about like we literally have these portals, and it's funny. I saw a meme that was like, women have the power, or women literally have a portal that brings new beings into the universe, so you can lower your voice when you're talking to me. So,
Period.
but but it is so true. It's like, wow, to put that in perspective, but then to not have to feel like we have to hide our relationship to said portal, whether it's currently bringing beings into the world or not, or ever does, like, to something so powerful is, another way of keeping us from knowing ourselves. And to know thyself is to have power. All ancient religious texts really reiterate that to us. So I think that's a really key part too, of like, it is part of like women's empowerment. And if you're someone listening to this and you're kind of like, I don't really understand how connecting to my sexuality or knowing my body is really going to empower me in life outside of the bedroom, like, let's talk about that. Like, I think I think a lot of people, especially women, don't really understand how sexual energy can be something that we utilize outside of our
Absolutely.
sex life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want me to speak on this?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I was just making
I
sure.
think that's the part where I asked the question and I just forgot.
It's okay. Yeah, but this is 100% true. Like what you were saying about the portal, right? And I loved how you brought in whether we're using it to create children or not. The thing that is pumped in society is using our portal for the creation of children, and that's it. But there are so many other things, like your creativity is housed there. Magnetizing, divine relationships and partnerships is housed there. If you have trauma in relationships, it is housed there. So we have to make sure that we are honoring that creative space in every which way. And that happens through sexual energy, right? Sexual energy can also be transmuted into creative energy. So sometimes we, especially as women, are made to feel bad if we have a high sex drive, as opposed to someone teaching us that even when you have a high sex drive, it's not always for you to use that energy to have sex. Sometimes it's for you to use that energy in terms of sex with your business, with a different entity, and to create in that space, as opposed to orgasming or going in that direction where you're just releasing the energy sexually, right? And so these are things that women need to know. It's not that they should be beat up because they, have a high sex drive, or because they have a low sex drive. Sometimes there's trauma there and the portals are blocked, and therefore that is why there is a low sex drive. And so there's just so many things like I can dive into in terms of energy, even this whole thing, like there's this whole like bacterial vaginosis type thing, and now there's this whole, everybody is using boric acid now to like push up there and to get rid of
Wait,
this
what?
BV.
Wait,
It's
what?
it's like this pill. It's a pill that I don't even know what the ingredients are, but you literally put it up there, and there are people that have BV consistently, right? After they're having sexual intercourse with their partners. And even this is a conversation that I want to bring into the space where energetically, sometimes if you have trauma, or that person has trauma, or that person has a soul tie, or that person has something that they have not healed or cleared out, that literally is the cause of the BV coming back. Because when two divine beings come together, there's no room for BV. It's just sex. This is a part of the concept of sacred sexuality, is that you and that person that you are connecting with vibrate on a completely different frequency, where disease and those things, it just isn't a thing, right? But again, I don't want to go too deep because that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, right?
Right. And
But these, go ahead.
oh no, and just for like people listening, this is kind of where like sacred sexuality, there's like the physical kind of plane and level and emotional, and then there's also this spiritual kind of higher level plane that we could, yeah, that might be a part 2 podcast, but but it is a good thing to
There's
mention.
so much energetically to talk about in terms of sexuality, so much.
There
And
is.
so for us as women, we just have to make sure that we understand ourselves, we understand our body, we understand how it works, right? the portal is not only to create children, it's just for creative purposes, period, to create, right? And so once women can understand that you are not just here to be fertile in terms of birthing children, you are here to be fertile in terms of money, magnetizing money, fertile in terms of magnetizing soulmates, right? People that are here to help you on this journey. You are here to magnetize all that this world has to offer. But if that center is turned off, and people, again, you were speaking about people or women not understanding the importance of that, that's why, because they haven't experienced that pleasure that they seek, right? And experiencing that pleasure is going to show you, it's going to teach you how to experience pleasure in other facets of your life and to stop settling for the bare minimum, right? In every other regard. So most of us will settle in relationships and say, oh, okay, it doesn't get much better than this. But when you know how to give yourself pleasure, not just sexually, being able to touch your body in certain spaces and know, oh my God, this is a spot that it sends chills up my spine. When you know how to give yourself foods that make you feel like a goddess, when you know how to do those things, a part of sensuality, right? And taking care of the body that the divine has given you, and you understand pleasure in that way, it opens up a completely different world for women. And that is why society doesn't want us to know about this, because then you start to take the power, right? The power card that men play, and you start to shift it to the women. They don't want that, because when we aren't in a space of our pleasure, understanding ourselves as sexual beings, being secure, because even if we look at chakras, those lower chakras are all about foundation, security, self, personal power. When you are outside of that, you become a cash cow for them. You become the person that you buy things because you are trying to fill a void that most don't understand can only be filled when you know thyself on that level. And you can give yourself this thing that you're seeking externally that actually is supposed to happen within you. And so it's so important for women to open up that center, to know themselves in that way, to not make this thing feel like an icky topic, or we can't speak about this, or let's hide over here and talk about it, or talk to our girlfriends on the low about it, but not be able to stand in that power and that truth that we are sexual beings, sometimes more sexual than men. Hello. And we can own that and be in our power in that way and have it impact our lives exponentially. Like, it's crazy.
I love how you're bringing in two of the things specifically around sensuality and men not always being as sexual or sensual, especially sensual. And I think, one thing that around that, I think, is that I feel like men also aren't really allowed or trained or empowered to be sensual as well. And it kind of ties into, yeah, like they really aren't. And they're missing out in that too, from their own self-pleasure as well as with a partner. But I think it also ties into kind of the larger thing that I know you've talked about on your Instagram and whatnot. And I've kind of dove into on my end, which is the topic of like, sex having to lead to orgasm, or at least being focused just on the orgasm, whether it's, sex with yourself or sex with a partner. And I'm curious what thoughts you have around orgasm and how it plays into the sensual and the sexuality and just the
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, I am big on, yes, everyone should experience an orgasm. Absolutely. Like, I believe that women should experience that, men should experience that. Absolutely. But when you start to see sexuality as something more sacred, and you begin to see your partner and your connection as something more sacred, it no longer becomes the focus. And even though that seems counterintuitive, it actually leads to more orgasms, because your focus is no longer getting to this place. It's about getting to know this person. It's about getting to know yourself in this way, where you kind of just know what brings you pleasure. And so I feel like the most important thing about sex is self-exploration and exploration of your partner, understanding their body in a different way, being able to be vulnerable with that person, being able to bring all of yourself to that person, not feeling like, oh my God, I have to cover this, or I have to hide this, or oh my God, he's looking or she is looking at my arm. And, they, whatever, all the pronouns, however you identify, just being able to be your full self with your partner. That is so important. So, yes, while orgasms absolutely are necessary, for me, in my mind, sacred sexuality is the exploration of yourself, the exploration of your traumas, your joint traumas, the explorations of your soul ties, the people that you might have connected with that have had negative impacts on you, being able to explore that either individually or with your partner, so that you reach another level of vulnerability and sensuality that ultimately leads to you being able to sit back, relax, having it become more natural, and therefore absolutely leading to an orgasm. And then also, we're just not educated about orgasm either, because there's about 20 ways to orgasm, and I feel like everybody knows one.
I want to
So there's that.
now. Like,
Right. It's
I
like,
need
so
that.
there's that. So, but this is a part of sensuality. It's a part of vulnerability. We are so closed off sometimes. Our men are closed off that we'll try to do certain things, and it's like, oh my God, men don't do that. And it's like, you have to find someone that is comfortable enough with themselves, in their divinity, in their sexuality, that they are not going to allow their trauma to speak
Mm.
beyond their truth, right? Because the truth is, everyone wants to feel pleasure. And what happens in your bedroom, in your car, wherever y'all are doing to do, that is between you and your partner. Unless you're performative, then hey, be my guest. But for the most part, it's between you and that person. So there really is nothing to hide if you are truly exercising sacred sexuality and you are with someone that you trust, right? Because that's a huge part. But for the most part, we as women don't trust ourselves, or the men don't trust themselves. And then we're in relationships and we're trying to trust the other person, but we barely trust ourselves. And it's just a whole bunch of mixed match energy. And therefore, we can't explore each other because we don't trust that that process is going to be worth our while. And so
Mm.
it's important for us to know ourselves, for us to operate from a space of love, for us to operate from our truth, for us to trust ourselves and to understand our pleasure points, so that therefore, when we bring someone in, we're not bringing them into our trauma. We're not bringing them into, I can't be fully available to you because I'm not fully available to myself. We're actually bringing them into a space where you can absolutely connect with this person in the way that the divine intended for you to be able to connect. Because sex, when done in that regard, is such a beautiful, creative, it like I don't even have words to explain it. I don't even have words to explain it. Like I've
Elevated.
been married for 10 years, and there are still things that you start to uncover, like with your partner beyond, and I'm like, 10 years. So sometimes we're just like, I can't stand somebody for 10 days. But it's like, when you're really doing the work and you are really taking off the layers of hurt, of shame, of pain, and you're starting to actually connect with the soul of an individual, right? And then you're doing the physical acts of connection. It just becomes such a powerful thing where one like divine being is raising up another divine being, and it becomes this beautiful exchange of, I'm giving to you, but I'm also receiving from you, and vice versa. We're both giving and receiving from each other. It's not that one is giving and one is receiving all the time, or you get what I'm saying. It becomes a beautiful, like an equilibrium of give and take, and that is when you will just be like, listen, I could do this forever. Okay, I could do this forever. I could be here forever. But it really becomes so much more than just an act. It becomes something that you realize, this is important for my life. This is important for my growth. This is important for my expansion as a divine being. This is not just me having sex for a moment. This is something that is continuous. That is how you practice sacred sexuality, is knowing that even though this seems momentary, every single thing is connected. The way that you treat yourself sexually is how you are going to treat yourself in other regards, relationally, mentally, physically. If you are not taking care of yourself in that way, you're not going to take care of yourself in any other regard. So it's really about understanding that how you do one thing is how you do everything, and that ultimately everything is connected. It
Mm,
like without a doubt, it's all connected. Yeah.
yeah, no, gosh, there's so much power in that. And I think I would love to know for for anyone listening too, if they feel like they have yet to experience that kind of elevated, sacred, sexual experience. And there's obviously, there may be, we'll keep to the general basics. We'll say folks who have been in a relationship, or are in a relationship, I should say, and then folks maybe who are sexually active, but they're having, they have new partners or different partners, or they don't have that kind of like how do they create, how would they go about creating that experience? And maybe part of that is clearing the things out, like you said, like being aware of like what
Absolutely.
trauma. So I guess starting there, what could folks like, how could they start to dabble with that?
So I would say just for me, it would be after sexual intercourse or self pleasure sessions, actually sitting with yourself. Sometimes I like to kind of just focus in on that center and say, what is it that you have to tell me? That is how I started my journey, was just after a session, I would sit, I would check in with myself, with my body. I would check in with her. She has her own name. She got it going on down there. And I would say, what is it that you have to tell me? What is it that you want me to know? What did you love? What did you not like? How can I be more open with you? How can we have a better connection, right? Like starting to truly understand that everything, even though it seems like one body, every specific part also has its function. And your pleasure center is always going to tell you what is enjoyable, what your soul wants, and what it doesn't want. It will shut down when it's something that it does not want, and it will turn on if it's something that it does want. So just always doing that check in. Men can do this as well, women can do it, right? Check in with self, ask yourself what is needed at that time. And also after a session, a sex session, a self pleasure session, journaling, and just journaling from a space of like, what's coming up? What's coming up? Did I have sex and then did I feel alone? Did I have sex and did I start to get emotional? Did I have sex with this person and then I felt empty inside? A lot of us don't take the time to really ask ourselves, how am I feeling after this act with my partner, and what happens afterwards? So we don't even know what type of energetic exchange we're having with the person. Or when we're doing self pleasure sessions, we don't know what subconscious thoughts are happening during that pleasure session, and therefore we don't realize that sometimes the whole time while we're supposed to be experiencing pleasure, our subconscious is telling us that everything that we're doing is bad or wrong. And so we leave that session. Yeah, we might have orgasmed or we might have peaked, but internally we feel like shit, you know? And so just really doing a check in after every session, journaling. I know it might sound weird, but even if you're not like a actual, like take a pen and write it down after a session, go on your phone, go in your notes section, write down your thing, or turn on your voice recorder, just channel whatever information is coming through. Because if you even think about the connection that happens sexually between those two people, you are ultimately connecting with the soul of that person. That is what sex does. And so, whatever shit they have going on, it connects to you right there. And then you are connecting to their consciousness. Worse, if you are not like strapping up and you're in a heterosexual, like you are getting all of their consciousness during that exchange. So whatever baggage they have, that also becomes your baggage. And that's why most people think, oh, I'm just doing this act and that's it. And it's like, no, you're actually taking on the person's, they're good, they're bad, they're in between. You take on all of it. And so this is what we need to understand as women. This is what we need to be taught so that we can start to actually ask ourselves, is this something that I want to do? Or am I just desiring pleasure in this moment that I could give to myself? But if I don't know that I can give pleasure to myself, of course, I'm going to keep seeking a partner to give to me something that ultimately most of them don't even end up giving to you, because you don't even know what to do for yourself. They're not going to know. They think they know, because most women fake the funk. And that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, right? Right? But ultimately, it's about taking that moment of vulnerability and then telling yourself the truth afterwards. I just had this self pleasure center and I feel like shit. I feel like I did something wrong. I feel terrible. I hid during the session. So during the session, I felt constricted. I felt closed off. Like my body was tight. I was straining a little. Like whatever those things are. Are you breathing through it? Are you fluid? Or like when you're having a session with a partner, are you fluid? Are you able to move around? Are you able to try different things and feel safe trying different things? All of these things are important for each person to know so that they can start to have a foundation of what needs to be worked on. Because if you just keep doing it and you keep doing it the same way and you don't ever know that something is off, or you're not in tune with yourself, you're never gonna change anything. But if you realize every time I'm doing this act, I'm closed off, or I'm trying to hide, or I'm reaching for the covers because I don't want anybody to see me, you're not going to know the deeper things that are lingering there that are impacting how you experience pleasure and how you experience yourself as a sexual being. So that's where I would tell people to start, is after a session, self pleasure or partner session, actually journaling or really sitting with yourself after that and saying, how do I truly feel right now? What's going on? What's coming up for me?
Hmm. I think that's such a wise thing to do because there's so much learning there and there's so much intuition around her. I also am like, I like to call her a yoni. She's a her.
Yes.
But I know that one thing I've talked about with friends, like we've discussed, is how you're you can find a lot of indicators of how you'll be when you're sexually active with a partner, when you are by yourself too. Like you're saying that, like wanting to, like when you're with a partner, you want to turn the lights off, you want the covers. But it's funny how even in self-pleasure, you may do the same things and you're like, wait, I'm by myself. I'm naked with me all the time. What do you mean? And
Exactly.
yet that's a big thing. Or you're like on autopilot mentally, like you're like, okay, I need to go do this sexual act
Yeah.
with myself, but then you're not even present to it, or you go like straight to like, all right, 90 seconds orgasm, back
Yeah.
to whatever I was doing. And it's so, and then with a partner, it kind of becomes the same. You like try to hide, or you try to, or
Get there quickly.
you're not present. Yeah, you're not present. You're going straight to the orgasm. It's like sprinting a race and not even seeing what else is, on the path alongside you. So
Absolutely.
that makes a lot of sense of like, is really being introspective with your body and with your, I don't know, your private parts. Is that what we're calling them for everybody?
With everything, with the partner, with the privates, with all the P's,
Yes. Yes, with
right?
all
We
the
just need to
pain.
start being present, because imagine you having a session with someone where you guys are on the same wavelength, and you guys maybe even like have something that you're working on together, or you're trying to heal together, and doing it during intercourse together. That's now an even more powerful manifestation happening, because you two are both focused on the same thing while you're both joining your forces together. So many times, like we're in our heads, or we're thinking about what we're going to make for lunch tomorrow during this. I done turned off my light during this sacred act. And we can't even be present to allow this thing to work for us,
Mm,
right? The way that the divine intended. And so it's so important for us to get more personal, to get more open and more vulnerable, to have these conversations with our partner. What are you desiring to manifest? What are you working on right now? Like, what are you feeling right now? Like, is this just you trying to relieve stress? Should we talk before this, as opposed to just going right into sex? Because you'll start to find that you being able to use that intuition to tap back into the soul of that person makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more
mm,
free, because you're not just on autopilot, as you said. You're not just, oh, I know how to make him get to peak, or I know how to make her get to peak, and so I'm just going to keep doing the same thing, and then they're satisfied. It's like, no, go beyond that, a little bit beyond that. That's when you're going to understand that sacredness of, wow, this is way more than just us doing this thing. It's way more than
mm,
that, but we've been overlooking it because we're not taught.
mm. Yes. Wow. And I have a question too I mean, it would apply to people who are sexually active, obviously, but also people who are practicing abstinence,
Yeah.
whether it's long term, or I know some people do like spurts of it,
Yeah,
almost like doing a cleanse. You're like, okay, I'm not
I do
practicing.
it all the time. I call
Yeah.
it dick detox. I'm a mess child, but
Can you please do a course on dick detox, please?
listen, it's about to be a whole book, a whole
It
series.
needs to be. I'll be the first person in line to buy it.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. Okay,
all
so
coming.
if people are dick detoxing for either their entire life or anyone detoxing, but what are other ways that you can channel sexual energy? Like I know you mentioned like driving that into your business. Like for me, I think about like sometimes I'm like, okay, I need to go for a run or I want to work out and
Yeah.
exert it that way. But what are some ways, like especially for it being able to use creatively, like what would you recommend some ways to channel that sexual energy that way?
So honestly, anything creative. You can channel sexual energy into cooking, dancing. If you are somebody that likes to do sensual dancing, you can channel it into an art piece. You can channel it into everything, honestly, anything creative. What
Mm,
I will say is that I love for people to ask themselves the real reason behind why they are being abstinent. Some people are abstinent because they feel like, oh my God, God is mad at me if I'm having intercourse. If that's the reason, I would actually start to dig deeper into what is the real reason here? What is the real belief? And is it true? Is it my truth? And is this really what I believe, or have I been taught to believe this thing?
mm.
Or if you're doing again abstinence just because you need to detox, it happens to the best of us. You get what I'm saying? Like you might have a partner that you thought that you knew one way, or you just realized that like sometimes I'll have moments of, because I now understand my body better, it'll be like every single day, like I listen, girl, it just be a hot mess. And then I'm like, you need to you need to take a step back and understand that you can experience pleasure in other ways. But again, sometimes we get addicted, no pun intended.
I can't.
A mess on today, right? Sometimes you get addicted to this feeling of pleasure because you aren't experiencing it in other aspects of your life. And so ask yourself during your abstinence, what are other ways I can channel pleasure? Is it taking myself out on a date, right? Is it going to get bi-weekly massages and having someone else really channel their energy into my body and really being able to just melt in that table and not feel like I have any thoughts or anything. No one can call me. I don't need to hear a phone ring. Nobody can say, hey, you need to be at work at this time. Like it's just my time to, unwind and just be present. Like ask yourself, what are the other ways that you feel pleasure? Right. And then start to use the time of you being abstinent to find those other ways to encompass and draw in that pleasure into yourself beyond sex. I would say that is what is most important if you make a decision to be abstinent, or if you are like, you know what, I just want to take a break, is exploring other ways to truly have be I want to say be the embodiment of pleasure, is finding other ways to be the embodiment of that thing, not just having it be a momentary thing, which for most people, that is what sex is. It's a momentary getaway of this is pleasure. But what happens when pleasure becomes a lifestyle? What happens when sexuality becomes a lifestyle? When I get dressed and I'm like, ooh, I look good. And oh, you cute. Like that is sensuality, sexuality becoming a lifestyle. It's not just that I'm only going to dress up when my partner is coming because I want them. No, I need to start to feel good for myself for now. I need to enjoy how I look now. I need to have a certain energy about myself now for me, and then have that translate into the external world or for my partner and all of those other things. But it's really about understanding how to take care of yourself first. And I feel that when people are on their abstinence journey, there's no better time to really tap into self-love, self-care, self-pleasure outside of masturbation, right? Because you're being abstinent, but abstinence means different things to different people, right? Just understanding what those things look like to self. And
Mm.
not having anyone else define what it looks like to you. I think that is what is most important during that time.
I love that, because what I'm really hearing is through any of these stages that we've talked about or scenarios, that really there's some ultimate truths here, and that it's like that your sexual energy is really the seed of like your creativity, especially as women.
Yep.
I'm hearing that it's really a shortcut to knowing thyself, and that really knowing yourself in that way is ultimately going to help you identify what your truths are.
Yeah.
And I love what you said too in abstinence about knowing, like, why is this my truth? You know,
Mhm.
I've kind of taken this approach even in politics, regardless of how people feel. I'm someone who grew up in Ohio, lived in DC, now I live in Florida, so I meet people all the time who grew up exactly, you know, where they live now as adults and have always been there, and they have certain beliefs based on just that. And I always say, I always just, my thing, and probably my former, I was a journalism student, so it's always why, why,
Right.
why. So you know, I think I'm hearing that there's a similar philosophy that can be, you know, why am I feeling this way, or why am I choosing for my sex life and the act of sex to be like this, or to
Right.
not, or to be abstaining from sex, or
Right.
to, anyway, those sorts of things. It's like there's so much truth there.
Yeah.
So those are, to me, a lot of what I heard tonight in all of the different scenarios, and that there also is a pathway for everybody to explore those. And it's not, you know, I've heard of people doing some really amazing but like adventurous, I'd say, for the average
Yeah.
person, things like vaginal acupuncture and like all of these different things, and like
And yeah. No.
that may not be everyone's cup of tea, or, you know, recommended for everybody.
Right.
So I'm really grateful for a lot of the wisdom and education you provided tonight, both on a very tactical sexuality and sensuality kind of plane, but also in this, like, what makes it sacred, how we can tap into that. I just appreciate you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate you too. And I appreciate this conversation. I can't wait to just start having it more because it is so necessary in the world that we live in. So necessary.
We need
Yeah.
like two, a second one and a third one. I think you just need your own
Yeah.
podcast. I know you do IGTVs, so like,
Yeah. I definitely want to dive into podcasts. I think for me right now, I've just been so focused on really honing my message because there are so many, like, there's so much noise in the space right now as it pertains to what it looks like to be a woman. Like there's noise around, there's freedom and nakedness. So just be naked on social media and that is going to make you secure. And or then there's, you have to be modest and classy, and that is what makes you a woman. And there's so many rules and regulations.
mhm,
And for me, it's about taking a step back from that noise and really tapping into my soul. Because once I tap into my soul and, universal consciousness, I'm ultimately going to know what other women need to hear for themselves and not just be speaking from my indoctrination from different experiences in my life, but more so speaking from a place of soul. And I think that that is so important that we start to speak to the hearts and souls of women so that it's not this concept of a one size fits all. I believe that people can, yes, you can find freedom in nakedness, but then what if there's a woman that has been taught that modesty requires clothing? How can she do her work if there's this concept of what it looks like to be a free woman? And so I want to really dig into, you know, freedom for women and what that truly means. And freedom for women means that your path is going to look like your path, but it's also going to require you to understand your patterns, your behavior, what you have been taught, because my story is not someone else's story, right? So that's why I kind of like to speak from that place of this is what I have done, but this is what it looks like in a general sense so that people can take what they need, discard what they don't, but also so they can say, okay, that makes sense. And I can start to dig into my own work because I truly believe we're all intuitive if we would just sit down and listen to ourselves and our bodies.
mhm.
So I'm always going to bring it back to that focal point of listen to what your body is telling you. right? Journal for yourself so your truth can flow through you, because that is what's most important. Not what I'm telling you that you should be doing, but what your body, what your soul, what your divine wisdom is telling you that you should be doing on your path. So that's always going to be the thing that I bring it back to, is that sovereignty within self of, you know exactly what you need to do. You just haven't been listening.
Mm. Ooh, that's the one that always is like the stickler. It's like, you already know, just time to listen.
That's
Um,
it.
really is. Well, I thank you so much for sharing so much of this truth tonight, and for tapping into that universal consciousness and bringing it here tonight. I had chills like the whole time, because obviously things resonated with me, but it's just when you know there's like, oh yeah, that just rings true, and that frequency is just, it's so high, and it's just I really thank you for sharing that. And again, we're definitely going to do a part 2 and part 3 down the road. I'm like, okay, everybody get their heads around this one, and then we'll get into like some of the offshoots, because there's so many. So where can people follow you and engage with you?
So all things social media, if you look up Surya Sol, spelled SURYASOL, you will, if you type that into any search engine, you will find me and you will find my work, you'll find my platforms, and you'll be able to connect with me that way.
I love it. Yes, go follow her, because she has some really epic stuff, and she does taboo tarot, and it's just the bomb. I'm checking into the next one for sure again.
Oh, I'm excited. Let me know. I'm taking a break this week, but we'll be back on next week for Taboo. I'm actually changing it from Taboo Tarot to Taboo Talks, because I may not be doing readings per se anymore on it. I may still give intuitive insights, but it's going to be more so conversational like this, and us just being able to speak about some very taboo topics that impact us as women that people aren't speaking about, and they're not letting it be known that these things are impacting us. I'm tired of, especially in our spaces, people saying, oh, you're just lazy, or you just procrastinate, or you just have to work on your mindset. No, you need to free yourself as a woman, because as I said, all of us have a soul's purpose, a soul's mission. Every one of us came for a divine reason, and it is up to us to be able to clear all of the rubble and the rules and the regulations to be able to tap into that. And so I feel that the best way is through the darkness, because that's what they tell us is bad, and we hide it, and we hide ourselves. And so just bringing that to the light so that women can be set free on a soul level is really important to me.
I love that so much. We're taking the guardrails off of what it means to be a woman, from the modest, or the freak, what is it? The lady in the streets, freak in the streets, or like now it's like everyone has to be a boss bitch. And it's just like, can you
It's like,
just let us
no,
do us? And
that's
stop?
it.
Yeah.
There's power in motherhood. There's power in, women that are out there doing sex work. There is power that, like, every aspect of being what it means to be a woman is necessary, every single thing. And so we have to stop demonizing, what people call the shadow elements, and start allowing our women to just feel free to be who the hell they are.
Yeah.
It's necessary for women to be able to truly heal the world, because I feel that women are the healers of the world, right? But they have not tapped into that power, because there is so much red tape around what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I'm
And
tired of it.
we have a responsibility to make it start with us and one another. There's so much like women shaming women that goes on. So it's like we get to just hold ourselves accountable, and
Yeah.
and start with home, but really start with ourselves in that way. So,
And realize that if we dig deeper, the only reason we shame other women is because we are not free within ourselves.
yes. Oh, that was a good one. That was a really good one. Yes, you are so true. Well, I know you'll be talking about this kind of thing and more on Taboo Talks, so I'll be tuning in for sure. Thank you again. This was such a joy.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being a part of the council today. You can share this episode and tag me on Instagram at the DJ Genesis. That's the DJ JENESIS, or on Facebook at the Council Pod. Make sure to leave a review and subscribe